Okay, hey everyone, welcome to another fabulous Sales Hacker webinar. We have an amazing treat for you today. And before we get started, as everyone's popping in here, make sure that your chat is turned to panelists and attendees. And as we're waiting for everyone to hop in, tell us who you are and where you're coming from. Adam, Amanda, it's so good to see you. Anna Kaimak, so excited to have you here. Drop in the chat who you are, where you're coming from. Danielle, David, so excited to have you. And I'm going to just briefly go over our intros. So once again, my name is Katie Ray. I'm coming live from beautiful Sales Hacker in my lovely house in Fort Worth, Texas. So excited to have all of you here. We also have the one and only Sarah Shapiro. Will you tell us where you're coming from and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Sarah. I'm currently based out of Seattle, and I am the current Egoji team lead here at Outreach. So I'm responsible for all of the onboarding of our new hires, and I manage them for their first 3 months in the role.
Awesome. And if you don't know, this lovely fella to the right of me, at least on my screen, is the one and only Sam Nelson. Yes, his hair is actually blue. It's not a Zoom filter that he got specifically made for him. But I'll let you introduce yourself.
All right. My name is Sam Nelson. I'm excited to talk about this topic today. I'm excited to talk about this with Sarah, and it should be really good. This is like one of those things where if you mess this up at the very beginning of your own career or an SDR's career that you manage, it can be very hard to root out later. And so this can make a big difference really fast if you nail this. So I'm really excited to talk about this particular topic.
Absolutely. It looks like we've got people all over the world. I'm so excited to see everyone. We've got Baltimore, Boston, we've got San Diego, Nashville. As we are waiting for a few more people to hop in, tell us, what do you do? Are you a manager? Are you an individual rep? Are you a team lead? Sales enablement? Let us know so we can really make this conversation geared to you. Head of people, Autumn, nice to have you. Director of sales. Yeah, don't forget, drop in. And if you want to drop in too, let's get connected. Drop your LinkedIn link in there as well. I'm sure that we'll all have some awesome discussion today. Before we get started, once again, a reminder, make sure that your chat is turned to panelists and attendees. And in the bottom, you will see a little Q&A box. I'm going to be moderating that and the chat the whole time so we can keep this super engaging. If you have any questions that you want to ask at all, drop them into the Q&A box or in the chat, and we will be going through them as we go through today. We have a lot to go over. We want to make this so fun for all of you amazing managers, sales leaders, directors, and so make sure that any question you have, drop it in, and yeah, let's get started. Sam, I'll let you take it away.
All right, let's do it. So eliminating call reluctance on an SDR team. I want to introduce Sarah Shapiro in a little bit more detail. She had a very humble introduction, but she's very impressive. I'm really excited to have her with me. I chose her specifically for this topic because she's particularly well qualified to talk about it. So she is our Egoji team leader. And if you don't know what Egoji means, that's okay. This was something that we started at Outreach actually a few years ago. When I was first an SDR manager, we started this thing called the Egoji, and it works like this. So we stole the idea from Sparta. It's not an original Outreach thing. So what Sparta would do, they're the greatest warriors of all time, and they would divide their warriors into a couple of groups. Like all of the new warriors would go into something called the Egoji, and the tenured warriors, well, the new warriors would be somewhere, the tenured warriors will be somewhere else, and the new warriors would be in the Egoji. And that was specialized for new warriors. And so we stole that. The traditional SDR model is you have a bunch of SDR managers, and some have new reps, and some have more tenured reps, and the managers kind of dealing with all of those different issues. But the problems are new reps take a lot of bandwidth, training's redundant, training's inconsistent. What we do instead is we segment it this way. So there is Sarah over the new SDRs, and then the other managers are focused on tenured SDRs. New SDRs and tenured SDRs have very different problems, And so we can specialize on those specific problems. So we tried it out and we're still doing it like 3 years later. There are actually 2 Egoji leaders, Sarah and Josh. And yeah, that's great. The Egoji leader, by the way, to be an Egoji leaders are always top performing SDRs from outreach. And so all of our new reps get the chance to learn from someone who has been successful themselves. Sarah's over the first 90 days, and Sarah is an Egoji leader because she is really great. So she specializes in managing SDRs for the first 90 days. She was promoted after 9 months, which is pretty quick in outreach time. And she was top 10% as SDR and a model student and a model person for people to manage. And so this is Sarah. You're awesome, Sarah.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction.
Okay, cool. So let's go into the agenda. We are going to talk about there's a few sides of this we want to jump into. We're going to talk about exposure therapy, just getting used to cold calling, ways to increase phone confidence, and then some specific processes managers can install. Some of this stuff will bleed together, but those were the best 3 buckets that we could make up. So let's jump into it. Actually, one more thing I should say, kind of while we're on the agenda slide, is we are going to keep this a little bit casual. So in the chat or in the Q&A, actually, Katie, clarify where they should put questions if they want questions. If they have questions,
definitely go in both, either in the chat or in the Q&A. We'll be watching it during the whole time.
Yes. So like if you've watched me do live streams, I'm pretty much just like stand and deliver. This is going to be more casual. So if you have questions, you can throw them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat the whole time. And if there's a good question, we'll pause and we'll talk through it. And it's going to be fun. So here's the agenda. Let's go. So exposure therapy. Sarah, I wondered if you would be willing to kind of start with your own story. Because I think your story is relevant to this.
Of course. So I started at Outreach back in July of 2020. And when I started, I was horrible at calls. Like I was super just scared to get on the phones. I felt like I couldn't navigate a conversation. And I was scared to honestly even do role plays just because I felt so uncomfortable, and it just felt like such an overwhelming and scary and like new idea to me to have to call someone up completely cold. So, my first like 3 or so weeks as an SDR was, not doing great on the phones, not booking any meetings. And I remember eventually I was just so frustrated. I met with my then manager, Mark, and he told me like something that has always stuck with me since then. And it was that like, he was like, Sarah, you need to fail forward. Like, I can't help you improve if you don't just dive in and give it your all and like make those mistakes off the bat. So after that, I completely shifted my approach and kind of implemented a lot of strategies that we will talk about later today. But some of the key things that I did were, just doing a ton of role plays with different types of people, listening to a ton of like gong recordings, listening to my own gong recordings. But I think most importantly, the qualities that I sort of implemented was that failing forward, and also really being open to and implementing feedback from people who were, top performers. So I was constantly getting better.
Love it. And could you define, like, maybe go into a little bit more detail on what you mean by falling forward?
Yeah, so I think, that's, this whole webinar is about call reluctance. And I think that was kind of the definition of me when I first started as an SDR. I was scared to even pick up that phone. I was scared to have the conversation, but you can't predetermine an outcome, right? So like me not doing it is effectively worse than me just, going after it, making calls and failing at them. Because, if you're not even going to have that failure, you can't overcome it. So it's really important to just not be afraid when you are starting out and it's going to be more difficult navigating conversation. You just have to be open to being uncomfortable, open to making those mistakes, and then you can kind of retrospectively look back and identify areas for improvement.
Love it. And I think one thing that I want to highlight is that Sarah, I guess how this story ended was Sarah became phenomenal on the phones. And one thing that's important for whether you're an individual or whether you're a manager is that SDR's phone skills during the first month have about zero correlation with how good they are going to be when they finish as an SDR. How successful they are on the phones have much more to do with their rate of improvement than how they start out. So Sarah's story was the same as my story, was the same as like our best cold caller ever, Ken Amar. He was like our top performing SDR of all time. When I did my first role play with him, he was so bad on the phone, and I would say this in front of him too. I'm not just like the end of his story is really great. My first role play with him, I was like, this guy is so bad. If HR would have let me fire someone right away, I maybe would have done it. He was just like very bad on the phones. But he was very anxious to learn more, very shameless about learning more. He wasn't afraid of messing up in front of other people, and he improved very, very fast. And so that should be the theme of this. Okay, so how you start is actually pretty much relevant. And another thing that's important when you're talking about um, getting used to the phones is the first month, everyone expects that you're not going to be good. And so it's a good time to kind of like mess up out loud. So let's go on to the next topic. So some advice for individuals. We got some individuals, we got some managers here. We're going to go into both. So number one is reach out proactively for role plays. This is something that you did really well. Sarah, do you want to talk about kind of what you did specifically, and for other SDRs out there that want to get over call reluctance, how they can do some of those same things?
Yeah, so I think doing as many role plays in those like first couple months is crucial to your success. So if you're a new SDR starting out, I would recommend reaching out to as many top SDRs as you can, reaching out to other managers within your organization, and just doing as many role plays as possible, because it's always better to feel awkward and uncomfortable, practicing as opposed to when you're actually on the phone with prospects. I think that's super crucial. Another thing that I did that I think really set me up well for success is, not only doing a lot of role plays, but doing them with a variety of different individuals. Because I think, learning from top performing SDRs, being an SDR, like everyone has their own style and own things that work for them. So kind of learning all of those different methods and then trying them on for fit to see what really works for you and develop your own style is going to make you, a better SDR and give you different perspectives to implement.
That's great. And what would you say to, I can imagine a new SDR thinking, hey, I'm new to this company. I'm kind of nervous. I'm kind of like afraid to reach out to people, and maybe they'll feel like I'm wasting their time or they'll be annoyed by this. Did you feel any of that when you were first reaching out to people? Were you nervous about that at all?
I mean, I think, you're entering in a role where you're going to have to reach out to people completely cold when they don't want to talk to you. So I think obviously within your organization, I'm sure people are going to be a lot more receptive. But like I know personally, when I was an SDR, any SDR starting out, if they reached out to me for a role play, I would be more than happy to make that time in my calendar, because it shows a lot of initiative. And I think, as senior SDRs, you can really like respect how hard it is starting out and respect the hustle. So my biggest piece of advice would be like, do not hesitate. Just reach out to as many people as you can. Obviously, some people won't have the time to meet, but I think most successful SDRs will carve out that time for you, even if it's just 15 minutes to go through a quick practice.
Okay, I love that. So part of it is like, if it does feel awkward for you, that's great. This is part of the process. You're learning how to get uncomfortable.
Exactly.
But then the other thing for me is when I did this, I found that it was particularly, that people were particularly willing to help. They were more willing to help than I imagined in my mind. And so for individuals out there, just try it out. You'll find out it's actually not that bad, and people are a lot more willing to help than you think. Like people who are experienced SDRs, this is the one thing that they know in the world, like better than anyone else, is like how to be an SDR at your specific company. And they're usually surprisingly willing to help you out with the advice that they've accumulated.
I also feel like, you reaching out to a senior SDR and being like, hey, like, I heard you're really good at calls. Would you be willing to help me out? In a way, it's kind of like stroking their ego as well. Everyone wants to receive a message that kind of validates that they're good at what they do and that people are seeking their advice. So I feel like more than anything, people are really willing to accommodate that into their schedules.
That's a good tip. So everybody, including salespeople, like to have their ego stroked. So that's another good pro tip. Okay. So some advice for managers is make a statement early on. So we're going to go through this. By the way, this webinar is specifically for managers, so I'm mostly going to be speaking to managers, but the rules apply to everyone. So for managers, it's important to make a statement early on. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but it is much more easy to nip call reluctance in the bud than it is to just like course correct months down the road. Like you can do that. It's not impossible, but it's just at least 10 times easier to root this out at the very beginning. So we make a statement early on. We'll take you through some of the specific processes that we do to make a statement and to make sure that at the very beginning of an SDR's career, call reluctance never even enters into the equation. We've gotten pretty good at making sure that just doesn't happen after they leave the Egoji. So first one, by the way, I feel like I've talked about this like 4 times in the last week. If anyone's hearing me talk about this for the second time, I apologize, but it's relevant to this particular discussion. So I'm going to talk about it. Okay. So one thing we did before COVID, with COVID, it got a little bit hard to do. What we will do is when new SDRs come in, they're all kind of nervous. They're all walking in. They sit down and they will sit down. We will give them a list of people to call and a script about how to sell a pizza to a stranger. So they're all, can you imagine, like when you're first starting out in your new job, they have a list and they are calling strangers to sell them a pizza. We just say, whoever picks up the phone, it could be a receptionist or it could be it doesn't matter. You're selling a pizza. Okay. And so what we do is they'll call and they'll sell a pizza. And if anyone does sell a pizza, then we just call their local Pizza Hut and then we just order a pizza to their place and then say pay on delivery. So that's how we deal with it logistically. What's important about this is an extremely awkward cold calling session. This will be the most awkward cold calling session that they will ever experience. You're around a whole bunch of people you don't know and your new boss, and you're calling strangers, selling them pizzas. It's totally insane. And what will happen is once you get into that process for like actually selling pizzas, you realize it's actually not that bad. Like you can have your most awkward cold calling session ever behind you and realize it's not that bad. And actually, if you ever do this, you'll realize that it's actually the worse you are at it, the more funny it is. And so it's very hard to fail. So anyway, we do that. Then whoever sells the most pizzas, we give them a $100 gift certificate to Pizza Hut. I think some of the other managers will do something cooler than Pizza Hut, but I think it fits right now. Anyway, so we will do that. And then the tiebreaker goes to whoever gets rejected the most. Usually it's like maybe one person sells a pizza or no people do. And then whoever gets rejected the most wins. So we just make a statement super early on that this is all okay. And if anyone wants the script or the rules to that, I'll just put a link in the comments you can go to if you want to set that up at your own company. But it's an easy way that's kind of fun that just makes a statement that, hey, we're used to the phones here, we can do it, and then we expose them to their most awkward cold calling session ever, and it's not that bad. So that is the first thing we do. So we'll move you through kind of our week of weirdness for getting people used to cold calling. Let's go to the grinder. Sarah, do you want to take this?
Yeah. So when we're onboarding a new class, we have kind of the structure at Outreach is we have like a week of boot camp training where we kind of just throw everything at the new hires, have a bunch of speakers come on, do a bunch of different like role plays and practices. And one thing we do is the grinder. So how it works is 3 parts. Initially, we have all of our new hires like call all of the SDRs within our organization. So we just give them a list of phone numbers of every SDR and we have them cold call them for like an hour and try and book them on a meeting and like use the script to, book a meeting for outreach. And we tell all of the SDRs, like the number one rule is like you cannot let these new hires book a meeting, like be super hard on them, be the worst prospects ever, just to kind of initially get people, on the phones and, implementing the script. And another thing to add is this is literally on their second day of boot camp. Like, so their second day ever, at outreach when they're still learning everything, we just get them on the phones. So then we keep track of all of the meetings that the new hires book. And then the top like 4 or 5 then progress to the manager grinder. So then we each have them we set them up with a different respective manager and have them do a cold call and try and book them on a meeting. And for this one, we have all the other new hires watch. So there's kind of even more like pressure and all of getting people comfortable speaking to outreach in front of a bunch of different people. And then the top 2 from the manager grinder then progress on to do a role play with Steve Ross, who's our VP of sales. And he is like the hardest sell. So they try and book him on a meeting, and then the winner from that gets like a gift card. So it's a really good way to get people calling and get over that uncomfortableness, initially right off the bat on day 2 of training.
Love it. And Autumn asks, is this something that you can do like outside of the first week? And the answer is absolutely. You absolutely can. I mean, we're focusing on kind of our first week to talk through this just because we want to make sure we root it out at the beginning, but you can do this at any point. And back in the day, we used to do grinders every single week.
Yeah, we actually just started re-implementing that. So every single week we pick a number of SDRs to do a manager grinder at like 7 in the morning. So I think doing these types of grinders where you have the managers like portray really hard prospects is something you can definitely implement later on into trainings.
Yeah. And actually, let me clarify, so the grinder specifically for new hires is where we'll do like the seeding in the beginning and we'll do different things for that. Actually, like some things I did where we would have them, like we'll typically have them call other SDRs and mark the number of meetings that they set. I've also had them call SDRs who were off work just so they could experience genuine anger, which worked out okay, even though the SDRs didn't like it all that much. We've done, what else have we done for the seeding? Other cool things. In any case, so we'll do that, and then we'll do a bracket style reaching out to managers. And then, for the weekly grinder, we have like every single manager in a room, and the SDR is doing a role play with one of the managers while like 6 others watch, and then somebody writes down feedback. And it's pretty intense, but very good. So anyway, so those are a couple ways we do grinder. Anything else we need to talk about on this, Sarah, or should we continue?
I think one more thing to add is, doing those weekly manager grinders, it's a really good way to get reps to kind of like hone in on their skills. Like I know at Outreach, a big focus for all the reps is now like using above the line language, like to target higher level executives. And for those manager grinders, like people would be like prepping, doing like role play practice, the other SDRs, like creating their own scripts to try and like utilize that language. So it's definitely a good way to like keep people on their toes and, like implementing those effective strategies.
All right. Okay, so they've got the grinder, and then, make sure there are processes to ensure that role plays happen. So, group role plays. So this is different than the grinder. Do you want to talk about group role plays, Sarah?
Yeah, so something that we actually implement, even before we do the grinder, is in the boot camp, like pretty much every single day, we carve out 30 minutes to do, role play sessions. So that will, it'll be me and like whatever other managers are like leading the training, so like me and Josh. Um, we will on a Zoom with all of the new hires, just like dive right in and start doing role play practice from day one. So we'll just pick a random, new hire SDR. One of us will play the prospect, and then the other manager will give feedback. And I think just starting this, similar to the grinder right off the bat, just has people like dive right in, get comfortable, being uncomfortable and stumbling across the script, and really learning. And then additionally, all of the other new hires watching get to observe what the calls look like and kind of get better just like listening to that feedback. So it's just another way to make sure that people are becoming comfortable with, calling and having all those eyes on them from day one.
Awesome. We got a good question from Emily. She said, are there any specific tips for doing this all remote? Sarah, that's kind of been your world for the whole time. Is there anything you'd add about doing things like this remotely?
Yeah, I think Zoom, obviously, like that's kind of how we conduct this. So just like making sure to schedule out those questions or out those sessions in like a Zoom room and have everyone jump on. And then kind of how we go about this is we have everyone turn their cameras off, just to implement more of like a call type scenario. So you're not kind of just like watching someone's face while they're cold calling and just like run it through. So I think it functions pretty similarly to, how you would go about it, as if you were in person, just making sure you're being proactive to schedule out those sessions, make sure everyone attends, and just get that practice in.
Cameras on or cameras off?
Cameras off.
Cameras on.
No, I feel like off is better. Just so you have that like call, or like, it's like more simulates a call, but I guess you theoretically could do cameras on.
Okay, group role play. So we have group role play. Let's go to quota for doing role plays. This is another. Sarah, why don't you talk about this?
Yeah, for sure. So another thing that me and Josh have implemented in our training is, so we have that first week of boot camp, and then after that following Monday, we tell all of the SDRs, we like emphasize the importance of doing role plays. So we're like, it's going to be crucial for your success that in this first month you are doing as many role plays as possible. And one way we ensure this is the first week we say, okay, go like your job for like this week, or one of your objectives is to schedule 6 role plays this week. And so we'll give them like a list of like the top SDRs they should be reaching out to, and we'll have all of them go and like schedule 6 role plays to accomplish by like end day Friday. And then we'll kind of like keep doing that. So just like setting those objectives to give like the, new SDRs like, oh, just to kind of ensure that they're actually implementing this, because you can tell SDRs like, oh yeah, you should probably schedule some role plays that'll help you with your call practice. But I think having like specific and measurable objectives better ensures that they're actually reaching out to people, and getting that practice in.
Great way to make sure that it's happening. Love it. Cool. So quota, let's go to seal style role plays. Okay, I guess I'll just talk through my own experience when I was a new SDR, because this is definitely my experience when I was starting out. Is I remember going through the role plays, and the grinder was very tough. Okay. Actually, here's one thing I forgot to mention about the grinder is we'll have SDRs call all of the SDRs and try to set meetings. And I would Slack all of the SDRs and say, we have one rule. Nobody takes a meeting. Okay. So obviously some people did set a meeting, but the point is that they were very, very tough on the phones. And I got that same treatment when I started as SDR. And so the role plays were always very, very, very different. And I noticed when I first got onto the phones that it was so much easier than role plays. Just because the role plays were tough. And so this is like the same thing that Navy SEALs will do is actually, someone correct me if I'm wrong in this. I think more people die in Navy SEAL training than die in actual combat. Training is way harder than the actual combat and the actual missions that they accomplish. The reason for that is like they get used to this really every possible scenario and really difficult situations. And so when they're into moderately difficult situations, they're just like, it's way easier than what they're used to and they can just execute. So another way to think about role plays is get them used to it being very difficult and then letting them be confident when they get onto the phones and realize, hey, I can really do this. Anything else you'd want to add to that?
I think you pretty much covered it.
Cool. All right. So yeah, SEAL style role plays, and then another thing, I just want to add is keep phone processes simple for new reps. There are a million different things that you can do and little things that you can do to improve. It's important that the first framework that you teach reps is simple. So I just wanted to add that in here. Okay, cool. Ways to increase phone confidence. Okay, this recording sign looks a little bit like a Japanese flag, but it's supposed to signify recording. So so call recordings, we're going to talk about this in a few different ways. I'll talk about AE call recordings first because this was a big thing for me. I think when I first started out, I listened to 8 hours of discovery calls from our top account executives. The cool thing about discovery calls is it's like a very, very long cold call. I mean, it's not a cold call, but it's like a very long version of a high-level explanation of what we do. Without, they're not demoing or anything. Okay, so they have to do it verbally and they have to keep it high level. And so by listening to all of those, it was good for a couple of things. Number one is it was very good for me to have a high level understanding of how the product worked. Because prospects will ask our top SDRs all kinds of questions, and I'll hear them explain it on a high level. So on a high level, I have heard everything. Okay, so I have this confidence, even though 90% of those things they ask about I'm never going to have. I know that I'm never going to be caught flat-footed because I know the product really well. It also gets me excited about the product. In discovery calls, AEs get the prospect excited about the product. And so by listening to tons of discovery calls, by osmosis, you can is osmosis? I don't know what osmosis is. Hopefully that's the right word. But anyway, by exposure to that, you can get excited about the product because you hear our top AEs genuinely getting prospects excited about it. So you're excited about it. You understand the product on a high level in a very holistic way and how things work together. And the other thing is if you go and do this, which I highly recommend you do, if you're feeling at all unconfident on the phone, spend 5 hours listening to the top AEs disco calls. You'll be surprised at how much more confident you are. While you're doing that, I want to recommend that you write down the little phrases that account executives say that get people to go, oh. Okay, look for aha moments on the phone because those little ways to explain things can come in really handy on cold calls. That's how I got a lot of the objection handling that I did, was listening to top AEs describe things very simply that were common that people just got. And this is especially important if you have a new product. Like when I was an SDR, outreach was a new product no one had heard of. So it can be really important there. The other thing is I listen to maybe 2/3 of them at 2x speed because I want to get through a lot of content, but make sure you listen to some at normal speed so you can hear the way the gaps sound and what their tone actually is. So spent a little bit of time on that, but this was actually a big deal for me, and I haven't heard a ton of people talk about it. So the easy thing that you can do that can increase your confidence on the phone. Take this one, Sarah.
Yeah, so, kind of similar to what Sam was saying, one way that I found a lot of success in improving my calling skills as an SDR was listening to, the gong calls from like other top reps within the organization. So, every single day I'd probably listen to at least 30 minutes of gong calls just from various like top SDRs. and kind of how I would like implement this into my everyday is similar to what Sam said. Like if I heard a phrasing about, how to describe outreach, how to handle an objection that I really liked, I would stop the call and I would write this down on like a document, like a Google Doc or whatever, and then start implementing that into my calls and trying that on and seeing if like that was a good way for me to phrase things, when I was doing my own cold calling. Another thing that I started to do is after I listened to kind of a variety of different reps, I found that, my style and my tonality like resonated better with like certain reps. So I started listening to like more of their calls, and replicating more of their practices as I felt like it best fit my style. So I think this was crucial to, me getting better at calls, just because obviously, like I was given a script when I first started out and it was great. But I think that figuring out your own style and like kind of like replicating like other, what the top reps are actually doing, is kind of crucial to success.
I love it. Okay, so we talked about call recordings. Let's go to your own call recordings. What was your process for that?
Yeah, so I think one of the hardest things to do, just like as an individual, and especially as an SDR, is to listen to yourself. No one wants to have a call that they really bombed or they're not happy with and then play it back and listen to every little flaw. But I think that this is actually crucial to your own success, because you're never going to understand how you sound and what's working and what isn't, if you don't play it back and really like hone in on, what you're actually implementing and how you do sound when you're making a call. So, when I had either a really good call or a really bad call, I would first listen to it myself and try and identify, what I did well, what I didn't, and how to change that and improve upon that for next time. And another thing I would do is, sometimes I would bring these calls to like my manager or like my mentor or whoever and have them give me feedback. And I think this is a really good way to see what specifically you're doing and like work to improve upon that for next time.
Perfect. Let's go to manager tips for call recording. More tips from Sarah. So as a manager, what are the best practices here?
Yeah, so I think as a manager, it's really important to, be listening to your own reps recordings, because this is going to give you a really good understanding of like their calling style, what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are, which is obviously the best way to improve. So kind of ways that me and Josh go about this is we're currently having our reps tag us in at least 2 gong calls a week. So we just have them do that, and then we give feedback within Gong. We'll like pause on like certain parts and leave comments on, like this is really good, or like next time this is how I'd handle subjection or stuff like that. And then when we do our weekly one-on-ones with each of our reps, we'll go over the calls in person and kind of talk about areas for improvement. So, that's the way, like as a manager, I'm currently utilizing call recordings. Just to kind of give that individualized feedback on specific calls.
Yeah, and commenting on, when I've experienced not having some kind of recording software, and having feedback just verbally or on a high level is very different than being able to timestamp specific seconds. You can say, okay, right here, you waited 1 second too long. It's just it opens up a whole new area of feedback that's possible for managers. So.
And I think another thing to kind of add is, as you listen to more and more calls, I think one of the biggest areas newer reps struggle with is, objection handling. So you can start to identify like what the like most common objections those reps are facing, and then give, constructive feedback on how to overcome those specifically. And you can, kind of give a more targeted approach to, improve your reps calling skills as a whole.
Right. Okay, and then learn to think rationally about rejection. It's important to understand that there's this thing called emotional reasoning. And if you know what it is, you'll start to see it everywhere, where people mistake strength of emotion for accuracy of a description of something. So like, you might have like this huge fear of cold calling, but that does not mean that getting rejected on a phone call actually matters at all. Okay, the strength of emotion related to something is not evidence of actual importance. And so we have evolved in a way that makes us scared of rejection. I think I might butcher this, as I read this in some book. I don't even know what book it was. But back in the day when we were evolving, if we got rejected from a group, it could mean that we were dead. Like, people depended on each other, and getting rejected from a group was really dangerous for us. And so rejection in our heads is way more scary than it is in reality. So make sure that you're not emotional reasoning for this or for anything else. But it's important to recognize that your fear of rejection is completely irrational. The downside to getting rejected on a phone call is very, very, very small, even though your brain might think it's life and death. So it's important to just like take a step back and understand that rationally. So great. So let's lastly go into processes managers can install to prevent call reluctance. And we've touched on a few of these so far, but let's do a very quick, we'll go through a few things and we'll review a few things here. How to get people pumped up to call. Sarah, why would an SDR, why should they be excited to cold call?
I mean, it's the best way to get meetings. And I feel like, coming in, everyone wants to start out their SDR role and succeed right off the bat. So I think, pressing the importance of this can obviously be argued. Everyone has different approaches to this, but like the idea that like cold calls are the best way to like book meetings, like getting people on the phones is the fastest way to convert meetings is like a good thing to emphasize. And I think, just like having a really kind of like hyped up, like sort of like sports mentality to like approach to this, I think is really beneficial. For example, something me and Josh do is we'll do call blitzes. So we'll like pick designated times of the day where everyone is calling at the same time. We'll like before it starts, we'll like hype it up in the Slack channel, be like 5 minutes to blitz, like all capitals, like lots of emojis, just getting people hyped. And then while the blitz is going on, we have everyone announce their wins and just like keep hyping each other up. So if someone, books a meeting, they announce it in the chat. If someone like has a really great conversation, we'll encourage them to, put something in the chat about what happened. Or if someone just has like a really funny call or just like a prospect that even was like super mean or something, sometimes people will just post their recordings in there and then everyone can, just like laugh and just like kind of have that sense of community, which is really important, especially while remote too. So that's like one way that me and Josh have promoted sort of that sense of like getting people hyped up and ready to make those dials. I don't know if Sam, if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's really great. Other things for getting people excited to call, like 80-90% of their meetings will come from calls. Like, even some people don't realize like, oh, I'm just like a magical emailer and email is how I'm going to get all of my meetings. Like, number one, if you end up doing well, that's probably not going to be true. And if it is true, even if you get an email reply, that is going to be finished up on a call. So your success is going to depend on calling. I think that's an important point. Also, it's just like good for you. You feel good when you do cold calls or after you do cold calls, and it makes you, it's like good for you personally too. Like, when you do cold calls, cold calling someone that you don't know is like the world's most awkward situation. And as you get used to that, you'll notice like in your normal life that you get really good at diffusing awkward situations. It's like the secret benefit that a lot of people don't realize about being SDRs is like you actually get like pretty good at navigating awkward situations in social settings. And so there are a lot of good things about it. It makes you lots of money. It's good for you. It's healthy, gets you out of your comfort zone. There's a lot of good things about it. So let's go to our next slide. Build calls into the process. Okay, I'll take this one. So one thing, so when I was over the first 90 days, I would outlaw. So if you've seen this, maybe you've seen something similar like this from me before. Make a list of the different departments and the different titles and who we reach out to. Those in green are people who will go into a call sequence that has emails and calls like the Egoji sequence. Okay. So during the first 30 days, we will have them call our most important persona and only do call sequences. So automated sequences that don't have calls aren't even legal. So you can't get out of the first 30 days without having calls be part of your sequence. And then 30 to 60 days we'll bring in marketing. Okay, it's a different value prop for marketing than it is for sales, even though it's the same product. And so the next 30 days we'll bring in marketing, and then 60 plus days we'll bring in automation. And the reason I would do it that way is because if you automate, you actually will get meetings. And something dangerous that happens with new SDRs is they'll be on their ramping quota. So maybe they have a quota of like half of what their ultimate quota will be, and they can hit it with automation. And some people will mistakenly think that they're on the right track because they're hitting their ramping quota with automation, which is possible. And that is just not true. They will hit a very low ceiling and it will be very sad. So by simply just outlawing automated sequences at the very beginning, you can avoid that from becoming somebody's way of getting meetings. And that can be really awkward and painful to adjust for if they get 90 days into their role and they realize, hey, I don't have the skill set that's going to get enough meetings for me to hit quota. So that's one way you can do it. Awesome. Okay, and then that is all I have for the slides. We got a few minutes for questions.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, this has just been absolutely amazing. So much great information. I've been so blown away by all the great discussion in the chat from certain products, dealing with this remote training. And one of the questions that I think is something every sales manager, especially SDR managers, have to deal with is how are we able to keep up the positivity, right? And I know, Sarah, you kind of pointed on some things of, especially in call blitzing, which can be incredibly stressful and tenuous and disappointing and exciting and just this wide range of emotions, different strategies on how to keep up the positivity and excitement. But outside of that, just in our normal day-to-day, what are maybe one or two strategies that our attendees can kind of take with them today on how to keep up that really positive energy with SDR teams?
Can I start?
Yeah,
I've got a couple. So one is, and this is a very simple thing to implement if you're not doing it right now. When you have a bad call, say it's your fault. Even like the best cold callers, you'll have bad calls and it can be your fault. Maybe it's not your fault. But whenever you have a bad call, get on the next call as quickly as possible. Don't sit. You don't need to sit and analyze, or just get on the next call really quickly. That's an adjustment that I made that was very good for positivity. So you just get right back on the horse. When you have a bad call, get right back on the next call as quickly as possible. And I think I would echo what Sarah said about kind of celebrating wins a lot, and also even highlighting failures or fails. Like a lot of the best SDR managers that I know, they have that as some part of their process. Like when they have fails or they have bad emails, we celebrate them, we laugh at them, but we don't. It's just, it's fine. We make it clear that it's fine through some process. So, Sarah, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I would definitely, kind of going off what you were saying. I think a great way, after you get off a bad call or you get like a really horrible reply to your email, it can be kind of a bummer, right? And you can start to get in this cycle of like, oh, like I should have done this, like that, like, am I bad at this? And there can be like a lot of negative thoughts. And I think having a culture like, within your team where people are, just like posting that in the Slack channel or talking about over Zoom and everyone else just like helping you laugh it off is a great way to, get rid of that negative energy and like keep up that positive mindset. Another thing is I think that once you start seeing results, and you see success, I think that it's kind of like a wheel. It's like when success comes, you're going to have a better mindset, and then once you have that, you're going to keep seeing success. So I think just coaching early on, getting reps good on the phone early on, and having them see that success, straight away, will encourage that positive mindset as well.
That's great.
I
And
love that. That's awesome. That's really good.
yeah. Okay, one thing I want to add just on positivity is when emails are not that scary to send, but if you'll notice, those can be more painful. Getting rejection on phones is actually less painful than emails, and there's some reasons for that. People are meaner over email, etc. But also, over email, if you'll notice when you read email, you often read it in the snarkiest possible tone. I don't know why, but humans default to the snarkiest tone when they read emails. So that's just something to keep in mind when you read emails, is sometimes text can come off a lot more harsh than it is in real life. And also when you're sending emails, especially if you're sending an email to an AE on a hot button topic, just read it back to yourself in the snarkiest tone possible, because that's kind of maybe how it'll be interpreted. Just a side note I want to share.
I do appreciate that. Those of you that have HOAs, you may understand that is how I read their emails. And I'm like, these people don't care about us. That's awesome. And really, as we talk about this positivity, we have an attendee that asked, how do you create this culture, right, that's motivated to call without just doing competitions and prizes? That's tough. It's really hard, right?
You want to take that, Sarah?
I think kind of just speaking to, all of the things that we highlighted before, emphasizing the fact that success does come from the phones, that this is the fastest way to book meetings. It's where you will book your most meetings. Obviously, most people are in sales because they're motivated by something, whether it be, money or, internal drive, but it's kind of playing into or figuring out what that internal motivator is within all of your SDRs, and emphasizing that calls will get you meetings, which will help you achieve this, is kind of key, setting that straight away, as well as having that culture where you are empowering each other and hyping each other up, are the two main things that I can think of and I implement in my role as a manager. Sam, do you have any other ideas on that?
Yeah, I would say I think a lot of the stuff that we talked about a lot of these things are meant to act as a catalyst for this. When you have a quota for doing role plays, once you kind of have done that the first few times, it becomes more natural. Okay, when we do the pizza challenge, where people get used to doing awkward cold calling and they do these role plays and it becomes more comfortable when they do it, a lot of these things that we put in place kind of help shape that culture. And I would just say the very beginning of an SDR's tenure is very important for those managers out there. That's where you're going to get the highest return on investment for time, is for making clear what your culture is and just kind of setting that early on. It can be 10 times easier to improve kind of this cold calling culture at that point than later on. So that's one thing I'd add.
And we even had a chat in here 40 some odd minutes ago, saying that because this was not instilled, even now she's still stressed about making cold calls and doing role playing, and how much anxiety. And I think it's really all about normalizing and getting into the routine of this is just what we do. And I think what you'll see is this concept of social conformity, and how that'll play out as if you have one team that's doing this, and then the more you bring onto this team, and then the more they create their own teams, it's just expected that you're having these conversations, right? And so it's easier to keep going instead of just reintroducing this brand new idea. That's where you can get a little bit of pushback. So I think that's absolutely incredible. Let's see, we've got a few more questions in here. Okay. Any recommendations for people who are only SDR on a new sales team, so there's no history, no one else to learn from? So basically, where should they go to get some pretty good information?
It's funny you should ask. Well, I just posted, if you go to samnelsoncontent.com, I posted how I did objections. That's going to be particularly useful for people who are selling brand new products. Maybe people haven't heard of before. You can go there. Sales Hacker has lots of great articles on that too. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I would say definitely come to Sales Hacker. Go to our sales development channel, drop a question. We've got over 16,000 members, so you'll definitely get a very large array of responses, which is great. So, yeah. Well, I think we're almost at time. I guess since we've only got a few minutes left, one key takeaway I'd love to hear from both of you. If someone is only taking away one piece of information today, what would that look like? Sam, I'll let you go first.
Okay, I'll say, and this is to managers because this is specifically for managers. Make sure that you make cold calling part of the culture right away. Right away. Like the first thing they do, the first thing they do is something about cold calling, and we just make the point that we're a cold calling culture, and it's okay. Like we did with the pizza challenge. Make sure you get it right in onboarding, and then everything else will take care of itself.
I love that. Sarah, what about yourself?
I would say this is kind of similar or on par with what Sam just said, but like emphasize that mentality into your reps, like fail forward. Like I think like just right off the bat, like, having them understand that it's going to be awkward at first, it's going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to make so many mistakes, but like that's okay. And you're not like, instead of like, you're not going to be like, laughed at or like looked down upon for any of that. Like instead, we're going to look at that call, or we're going to look at whatever's happening and help you improve. So like creating that sort of culture is very important as well.
That's amazing. Absolutely. Yeah. It's all about creating a culture, setting that expectation from day one. I know we are at time. So, Sam, Sarah, best way for people to get a hold of you if they've got any more questions, what would that be?
Yes, for me, find me on LinkedIn. Go to samnelsoncontent.com. I've got a bunch of stuff there. But yeah, LinkedIn, I'm pretty responsive on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you. And Sarah, what about yourself?
Yeah, LinkedIn as well. Sarah Shapiro. I work at Outreach, obviously. So just send me a connection request. I'll happily accept it.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah and Sam. This is absolutely amazing. Such great information. For everyone who is still here with us, thank you again. Once again, this is recorded. It'll be sent out within 24 hours from right now. So keep an eye on your email. Forward it along to your sales teams, directors, whoever you want. And hopefully we will see you on our next one. So thank you all so much. We appreciate you and have a great day.